Reports coming out of Zelensky's camp overnight that Ukrainian forces shot down a Russian Su-25 fighter bomber jet over the Donetsk region. These small victories are quite good in terms of morale and propaganda for the Ukraine side.
Well, they certainly are important in terms of the morale and morale for the Ukrainian soldiers. It's been a difficult few months for Ukraine. You know, you do see that they had to reduce the mobilization age to 25. There is, of course, talk of, or certainly videos of soldiers who are mobilizing others using violence, and that's reprehensible. But unfortunately, the morale has been affected. And I think the Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Defence said as well that the Defence Ministry is now one of the most hated institutions in Ukraine. So it is certainly important. Ukraine is holding the line. Russia has, yes, it's made incremental gains, but it has been very slow. Ukraine is holding the line as much as has the capacity to do so. Hopefully, the American and European aid will come through in the near future. That will start to filter in roundabout now, possibly coming into the end of May, beginning of June, and so the game will change again. But Ukraine, by having small victories, is able eventually to bleed Russia dry. And we've seen that in regards to the Black Sea as well. Ukraine has done very well, effectively without a navy, in terms of pushing the Russians back to Novorossiysk, away from Crimea, and in terms of shooting down planes, and in terms of holding the line. These are small victories, but they're very useful for the morale of the Ukrainian army and for propaganda as well, in terms of getting the morale up for Ukrainians in general. Well, certainly David Cameron has talked about it when he visited Kiev. I think it was a couple of days ago now, and gave the green light for Britain to be able, sorry, Ukraine to be able to use British-made missiles in terms of attacking Russia. The Americans still are not prepared to allow that to happen, wrongly, in my opinion. And I think it's good that the British government has said finally that Ukraine has the green light, as you said, to push, also fire missiles into Russia, and to start to degrade Russia's military capability within Russia, which was always a problem in terms of Ukraine never was allowed, at least officially, to hit Russian military infrastructure and oil refineries inside Russia. It could only do so in Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine, which of course meant that Russia was keeping most of its forces within inside Russia proper. Now Britain has allowed it, and there have been other instances as well. I think this is beneficial in terms of having to push the Russians even further back into Russia, at least in terms of putting their military infrastructure away from even further away from the front lines. We know as well that Ukraine has the capacity, at least in a very few instances, has shown it, that it has drones that can reach 1,000 kilometers inside Russia and potentially could go even further. That is great in terms of being able to push Russia's military infrastructure that much further behind, and also making the logistical lines even harder for the Russian military, which so far hasn't proved particularly adept. Yes, of course it is learning, but the Russian military has had many issues in making it harder in terms of logistics, especially when the Russian soldiers' morale seems to be quite low. If we read the Z Patriots, then it certainly is a problem in terms of how the Russian Ministry of Defense has been able to supply its soldiers. It hasn't been great. So if Ukraine is able to push the logistics even further back into Russia, then it becomes that much harder for Russia as well. It's the traditional thing. This is the most important day in the Russian calendar. It's something that the Russian government really promotes as the successor of the Soviet Union. It's also because it's the successor of the Soviet Union, it's also the country that won the Second World War by itself. And so this is very important for the regime. And certainly we're talking about, in regards to Ukraine, they're refighting the Second World War, the denazification of Ukraine. It's Putin's own little victory, as it were, although that hasn't worked out particularly well for him over the last couple of years. So in terms of what he's trying to do, I think it is a show of force. And, you know, it is certainly annoying for Putin that a lot of this won't occur across Russian cities. It will only really be in Moscow. So I think he's trying to show a, you know, show of force. Also, there won't be as many forces on the ground in Moscow because a lot of them are in Ukraine and elsewhere. So I think he's trying to show as much capacity as he possibly can in regards to this. And it's also important because 2 days before the 9th of May, he's inaugurated for his 5th term on the 7th of May. So it's also very important in terms of, again, highlighting his legitimacy, his right to rule, and showing a big show of force in regards to the May 9th parades.